Hello, I'm Tracy Nicholas, and welcome to Folkloring. I am a passionate folklore practitioner, and to me, folkloring is more than just a podcast. It's my commitment to help you connect with your roots and awaken the wisdom within you. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Folkloring. Today I have with me Joe Shortridge, and he is the host of the 222 Paranormal podcast, which is a weekly show covering paranormal topics such as ghosts, aliens, Bigfoot, haunted locations, and a whole slew of other things as well. Welcome, Joe.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, doing good.
I'm so glad to be on the show.
So, before we get into everything that you do and all the exciting, cool, different things that you've seen and experienced, have you been folkloring lately? And if so, how?
Well, me and my sister, we were both through the show. We just got back from the Virgin Islands. We were in St. John in the Virgin Islands,
Mhm.
checking out a lot of the old ruins there, a lot of the plantations. We were just at Annaberg Plantation, which is known to be one of the most haunted locations on the island.
Mhm.
And we went through that and did some ghost hunting. It was kind of hard because the winds were kind of high. So EVPs were kind of out the door, but we had a great time. We've investigated a few other locations on the island. So that was our latest adventure, but we've been doing adventures all over the country.
Very cool. Very cool. As for me, I spent yesterday attending an herbalism conference online.
Oh.
And so I learned a lot of different things about some indigenous herbalist practices. That was
Mhm.
really cool. And about herbalism that you can use in your day-to-day life and some of the symbolism behind it. So that
Yeah.
was really fun for me. Although I am feeling very pressured today because I didn't get that much work done because I was at the conference yesterday.
You'll have days like that.
True, true. Okay, so let's dive into it. Can you
Yeah.
tell us about yourself and your path that sort of got you to where you are doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, not much. How about you? Oh, no. Um, so this journey's been going on for over 10 years. Uh, we've had the show for over 10 years.
Wow.
We're actually on our ninth season, but we were doing a few things before that. But I was always into the UFO side of things.
Okay.
And I had a experience with my best friend Jackie that kind of propelled me into wanting to learn more about the ghosty side of it.
Mhm.
So, you know, we always talk about the paranormal. Well, the paranormal is like an umbrella term for the different types. You got ghosts, you got UFOs, you got cryptids, all that. But I was more into the UFO stuff
Okay.
and alien stuff. I still am. I've got some massive telescopes over in the other room there that I like looking at the stuff. But my best friend Jackie, me and her, we met in high school and we were really close. I would say that we were sort of like soulmates, but not in a romantic way,
Okay.
but in a friendship way. And we would sit there and it'd be one of those things where it's almost like a psychic friendship. I would know when she was hurt. She would know when I was hurt.
Oh,
We'd call each other on the phone and the line would be busy because we're calling each other, all that kind of stuff.
sure.
And we were pretty much inseparable. We spent all our time together, did all kinds of things. And the one day, a few years ago, probably it's coming up on like 11 years now, I was at work and I worked second shift. So I got off work, went to Kroger's to go shopping. And coming out of Kroger's, I got a phone call. And I'm like, oh, this is weird. So I answered it. And it was her sister.
Ooh.
Well, her sister said, did you hear about Jackie? I'm like, no. She's like, well, she's on life support and they don't think she's going to make it through the night.
Oh my God.
Okay. So let me back up a little bit. Few years before that, 5 years before that this to be exact, she had a double lung transplant
Okay.
because she worked in a nursing home. And I believe my opinion is that she started getting sick when we were working on her house because we tore all the insulation out.
Okay.
And then working in the nursing home, I think it all added together. And she ended up having a double lung transplant.
Oh.
So she had to be really careful about what she did and all that. And every year she would go to Cleveland Clinic, which is 2 hours away, to get a test done to make sure that her body's not rejecting it, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And another thing with Jackie is she went deaf, so she had a cochlear implant. And if you're not familiar with that is, it's an actual wires inside your brain
Wow.
that she puts on a hearing aid and then magnetizes it to her head, and it sends the signals into her brain so that she can hear. And me being her good friend, I used to be able to tell when her batteries are going dead because she'd be kind of like looking off in the distance. I'm like, hey, your batteries going dead. And she had no balance, so every once in a while I might have turned off the lights so she would almost fall over, but I never did, honest. Um, but anyhow, about I'd say 3 weeks before she went for her test that year, I would get online and she'd be on there instantly. Joey, hey Joe, hey Joe. I'm like, and I was probably kind of rude to her, and I look back at it, I'm like, why did I do that? But I would be like, I'm busy, leave me alone, that kind of thing.
Sure.
But it seems like every time I would turn on the computer, it'd pop up, hey Joe, you know. Well, she ended up going for this test, and the last thing that she typed to me on the computer was, Cleveland in the morning. And I was like, okay, whatever.
Mm.
And then that next night, I got the call.
Yep.
So what happens is they take and they'll put a tube down her nose into her lungs. They put some fluid in and draw it back out. And
Okay.
that way they can tell if there's any infections or anything like that. Well, apparently she had that test done and she turned blue from the chest up.
Whew.
Okay, which when me and her were going through EMT classes, which is kind of weird, that was one of my favorite injuries, quote, is what used to happen before they had airbags and stuff like that. If someone got in a car wreck and they weren't wearing a seatbelt,
Hmm.
then they would hit the steering wheel, they would turn blue from the chest up. And that's called a pericardial tamponade.
Okay.
What happens is the pericardium around the heart fills with fluid and squeezes the heart, and the people die. Okay. And you don't really see that much anymore because of airbags.
Yeah.
But all through when me and her were going through EMT classes, that was an injury that I was like, that's so cool. I mean, it's kind of morbid to think that way, but it was just something that interests me.
Uh-huh.
Well, she had the same symptoms as a pericardial tamponade, which she turned blue from the chest up. So
Weird.
I think that they did something wrong when they put the fluid in. I think they put air in, which pushed the lungs out, which collapsed the heart.
Oh my God.
That's just my opinion, because of the way that it sounded. So, anyways, I get this call, and her sister said that, she was on life support and they didn't think she was going to make it through the night. And I'm like, all right, well, just keep me informed.
Hmm.
And I hung the phone up. And I'm like, wait a minute. What? I guess I was in shock.
Sure.
So I went home,
Yeah.
got cleaned up, and headed out to Cleveland that night.
Right.
Cleveland's a 2 hour drive
Hmm.
from my house.
Yeah.
It was weird because I've been to Cleveland, but I've never been to the Cleveland Clinic.
Okay.
And for some reason, I knew how to find it. I just drove right to it.
Oh, weird.
Okay. Which might have been her guiding me. I don't know.
Hmm.
So I got to the hospital and she was there and life support's going and all that. And we're kind of just hanging out. And after a few hours, I was like, well, nothing's going on here. I'm going to go home because I have to work tomorrow. And I'm like, I went home. And like I said, I worked second shift. I
Right.
went home because I had to go to work. And, I look back and I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? But, so I go home. I go to work the next day. While I'm working, I get a call again. And they said, they're going to take Jackie off life support in a half hour. And I'm like, okay, I'm on my way.
Right.
So I knew I wasn't going to make it. So I'm like, all right, think rational. You're not going to make it. So I went home, took a shower,
Hmm.
got in my car, and started driving to Cleveland. And by this time, I was a wreck.
Of
I
course.
mean, I've never cried before, but I was probably pretty close. I was a
Right.
blubbering idiot. And I shouldn't have been driving.
Oh,
And my friend Debbie was texting me the whole time, saying, it's all going to be okay, all that kind of stuff. So here I am, a mess, blubbering idiot driving. on the turnpike, which I should not have been driving. Plus, I'm texting. And like I said, I was in really bad shape. I felt like my best friend was dying because she was.
Right, of course.
And I got about an hour into the drive, and all of a sudden, I felt this feeling. Now, like I said, I was just almost on like a millisecond away from crying, and I got this feeling. Now, imagine a electric stove. You know the heating element inside electric stove?
Right,
Okay. Imagine if someone turned that on and held it over your head and then just like a hula hoop over your body, went down your body with that, how you'd feel that line of heat.
right.
Okay. So that's what I felt. That's the only way I can describe it. That's the exact feeling I felt. Like there was a line of heat that started at my head, went down my body, out my arms, out the fingertips, and then down the legs, and then out the toes.
Wow.
And I was like driving. So I'm like, all of a sudden I felt this, and I think I froze up. And I felt that. And the second it came out of my toes, I was fine, just like I am now.
Wow.
I had no worry, nothing. So I ended up making it to the hospital,
Yeah.
and I pulled up and went in the parking garage. I'm walking in the front door, and I get into the room, and her husband's there. And I'm like, hey, how's it going? I know I didn't make it in time, but I'm like, how's it going? He's like, well, they stopped all her medications about an hour ago, and they don't know how she's still alive.
Oh, wow.
So he's like, do you want to see her? I'm like, yeah. So I walked in the room, and she was laying there, and they still had the heart monitor hooked up, but everything else was gone. The tube down her throat was gone. She still had the marks on her face from where that thing that holds the tubes in and all that.
Right.
And I walked up and I picked up her hand, and all of a sudden the alarm went off. And I'm like, oh crap, I stepped on a hose or something. And the nurse came in and said, no, she just passed
Oh my God. So she waited
when
for
I
you.
touched her hand. So everybody's saying that she waited for me,
Yeah.
which kind of makes sense. And the reason why I call it a shared death experience
Hmm.
is because of that feeling I got. The only thing I can figure is that's the moment that they disconnected all her meds, and that heat going through my body is what she felt, is the only thing I can imagine. Because I had kidney stones one time, and I've got an epidural like the girls do when they give birth.
Yeah.
I got an epidural, and to me, that felt the same thing. I felt that heat go through my body because that morphine,
Okay.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I think that's what I felt with her. Now, you know, after that, we all kind of hung out at the hospital, and we were like, let's meet at her mom's house tomorrow. There's nothing we can do. This was a few hours after I showed up,
Sure.
and we all agreed that we were going to, you know, everybody meet at her mom's house tomorrow.
Right.
So I went home, and honestly, I don't remember the drive home, you know,
Yeah.
but I got up in the morning and I get in my car and I turn it on, and there's a radio station on, a Detroit radio station I've never listened to. And there was a song on there. Now, the thing about this song is Jackie loved REO Speedwagon,
Okay.
and she would play the cassette till it broke. She played the album till she broke it. She played the CDs till she broke it. And so that's those songs I heard 1,000 times. Well, I turn the radio on and I hear "Heard It From a Friend Who Heard It From a Friend," which I can't remember the name of the song right now, but it's off that album,
Uh-huh.
REO Speedwagon High Infidelity, and she used to play that song all the time. It drove me nuts. So right away, I get a sign, made me think about her because this song just popped on the second I turned my car on.
Sure.
Later that night, I had my first dream of her, and she was in my dream, and we're sitting there talking, and I go up to her and I'm like, the last time I saw you, you were dead. And that's just, my way of thinking about it. But since then, I've had so many, even a few days ago, I've had so many ways of communication with her, whether it's dreams,
Uh-huh.
whether it's the music from REO Speedwagon. Um, Good example is I'm writing a book about it.
Okay.
Okay, about shared death experiences. Gathering other people's stories and stuff. And I was at work one day, and I work in a factory, and I was on my machine, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, should I go home and put a show together, or should I work on the book? And just as I thought that, three machines down, I hear, heard it from a friend who heard it. I'm like, okay, okay, I'm going home, work on the book, you know? And but yeah, stuff like that. I remember having dreams about her where we were in a car, we were in a old convertible Lincoln, and we were making her sister and her husband go in and get us pop, stuff like that. It wasn't any dreams where she's, trying to say this is what afterlife is like. No, it was always just standard stuff, weird things, making her sister go get us pop, stuff like that. Another thing about it too is after having all these dreams about her, I've noticed that when we talk in our dreams, we never move our lips. It's always
Yeah, yeah,
telepathic
yeah.
because she was deaf.
Right. That's
So she wouldn't hear me anyways. That's the only thing I could figure.
interesting.
But it's gone on like that for years now, having strange dreams with her. But like I said, nothing where she comes in and says, this is this or this is that, or be careful of this. It was just normal dreams.
Hmm.
Now, a few weeks ago, I was doing a float session. I do float sessions. It's sensory deprivation tanks. I don't know
Right.
if you've heard that, but
Yeah.
you basically float in 6 inches of water and it's completely dark, completely silent. And it's a relaxation thing. It's one of the best things you could do. And I do hour sessions. So I was doing it. I get done. And my sister messaged me. She's like, we're at JoJo's. Come meet us. I'm like, all right. I don't drink, but I go to JoJo's, hang out a little bit.
Uh-huh.
So I went there. And our friend, who's a ghost hunter also, love her to death, but she tells the same stories over and over and over. So I was at the bar, and she comes in and she starts telling the same story over and over and over. And I'm like thinking in my head, I'm so sick and tired of the same old stories.
Hmm.
Just as I thought that, the jukebox comes on, playing REO Speedwagon, which has not been on all night. And I hear this, yeah, so if you're tired of the same old stories, I'm like, okay, okay, I'm going. All right. You know, communications like that. And I've been studying up on shared death experiences, and they're very common. They're a lot more common than people think.
Hmm.
And I just, after talking to a few people like Dr. Raymond Moody and stuff like that, he was like, you had a shared death experience with her. You experienced her death when she died. And I'm like, well, I can only imagine that because we were such good friends.
Hmm.
And he's like, she waited for you.
Yep.
The people that are passing can wait for their loved ones to show up, or they can wait for the loved ones to leave the room, which is very common.
Interesting.
It's a good
Yeah.
example is my dad. Me and my sister put on the Toledo Bigfoot and Paranormal Convention, and I'm happy to say it was a huge success. We had standing room only in the speaker rooms and stuff like that. But that day is the day that my dad died.
Oh.
We worked for months to get the convention together, and it started. We got all the vendors coming in. We, had to go to the airport, pick up Ken Gerhard, all them, and the convention starts, and find out we get a call saying that Dad's in hospice and he's probably not going to make it.
Mm.
So my sisters all leave. They're like, we got to go. I'm like, just go. I'll take care of the convention. And our vendors are awesome. They were so cool about it. And it's the only show we put on, but our vendors all said, go, we'll take care of it. We'll clean up, do all that. But I stayed and come to find out, my dad talked to my sister the night before and she was like, I'm worried about you, Dad. And his last words to her were, do the show. But going back to like the Jackie story, when we had our convention, I talked to a few people that were vending there,
Hmm.
and they all said the same thing. They're like, that's classic shared death experience.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that in my book, I talk about quantum entanglement
Yeah.
and how we do on like really on a physical level, the people and things that we come in contact with most often do have a connection with us.
Hmm.
And there's a part of game theory that's called quantum pseudo-telepathy,
Okay.
which basically says that if two people are playing a logic game, right?
Hmm.
And like imagine a grid, right? And one person has to fill in rows and one person has to fill in columns. And if they don't hit the same square,
Yeah.
and they both win that round, right? And
Okay.
then they have to do it again. And so the people who have known each other and have had contact and communication before playing this game do significantly better than people who
Hmm.
haven't.
Yeah.
And that's even if they can't communicate at all during the course of the game, right? And so we do get these connections where we start to kind of, vibe with somebody else and how they're thinking. And yours was just like that, but on steroids, right?
Yeah.
Because like in the gaming, they call it pseudo telepathy because it's not true telepathy of reading another person's mind because
Yeah.
there is that physical connection. And it doesn't matter how far away people are from each other. And it was Einstein that called this theory spooky action at a
Yeah.
distance.
Hmm.
So it sounds like that's exactly, the kind of thing that happened to you. Now, the stuff that happened after she passed with the dreams, that seems to be an entirely different thing. But yeah, you said that you were more into the whole like aliens and
Yeah.
extraterrestrials, but you guys were early on, even before any of this happened, you were still out ghost hunting, right?
No, not at that time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. See, and that's what I mean. After this happened, it made me want to think more about the afterlife and what happens during the afterlife and ghosty stuff because this happened and like I'm thinking a year later. So it had, man, now that I think about it, it had to have been about 11 years ago. But a year after that, I was really looking into it. I was listening to podcasts, all that kind of stuff. And my sister was doing a ghost hunt with the Ghost Adventures crew out in Ohio State or Ohio State Reformatory.
Hmm.
And she came back. She's like, "Man, you're into podcasts and stuff." I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Why don't we just start one?"
Oh,
I'm like, "Okay, let's do it." So I went out, I checked out, the microphones, all that stuff, got the equipment, and we started the podcast. And that was 9 years ago. And we're still
wow.
going strong.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So that's what put me into the ghosty side of it. And then when she came back and said, "This is so much fun. Let's do this." I was like, "Okay, let's do it. Let's start our own podcast." So we did.
Very cool.
Hmm.
All right, so let's talk about the podcast
All
and
right.
some of the stories that you've come across. What are some of your favorite stories that you've talked about?
I still like the time slip stuff,
Okay.
time slip and like you were saying, quantum entanglement, that's stuff people are doing something at such far distances and they realize that their friends are doing the same thing or stuff like that.
Mhm.
But I'm big into the time slip stuff.
Mhm.
And that goes along with my ghost hunting style also because I think, how do we know that we're not the ghost that the people have seen
Mhm.
in their houses?
Uh-huh.
Great example. I know this isn't one of my stories, but I've heard it. Is there was a story of this elderly woman, and she always talked about these three ghosts that were in her house, and she described them as having are being black figures with hoods.
Okay.
And she would talk many times that she saw these ghosts, and they would come up to her and try to get her or whatever. I don't know. Well, she ended up passing,
Hmm.
and seeing that it was a haunted house, people wanted to ghost hunt there,
Sure.
and there were these three ghost hunters wearing their ghost hunting hoodies
Uh-huh.
and they walked in. They swear they saw the woman sitting in the chair.
Ooh.
And when she looked up at them, she had that look on her face and then disappeared.
Wow.
Which makes me think, are those the ghosts that she saw?
Hmm.
Because, being ghost hunters, we got to wear black. It's like a law. And they had their hoods up. They
Uh-huh.
said, "Oh, yeah, we were wearing hoodies." So were those the ghosts that she saw? And was her ghost seeing them the reason why that house is haunted? So
Interesting.
it's like a time slip thing.
Well, that reminds me of time cube theory.
Okay.
And time cube theory, it's it's something that they're studying, and the theory behind it is that time is like if you imagine it as like instead of a linear progression, if
Hmm.
you imagine it as like a massive cube, right? And you're sort of moving through, and each slice of the cube is a different moment in time, but they
Hmm.
all exist
Yeah.
simultaneously.
Yeah.
And so it's theorized that people can, in fact, like go to the future. And sometimes it's theorized that like psychic abilities are when you're sort of in that passing through from one slice to the next. And so you get a glimpse ahead a little bit. And this is like not just like random, theory on the internet. There's a Center for Memory and Time that is at I don't remember what university it's at.
Huh.
Sydney? I think it's maybe in,
Is it Oxford?
no, is it
Because
Oxford?
I know there's a I can't say that word, psychological research group, but it's metaphysical stuff.
Yeah, no, this is like the School of like Time.
Okay.
And so that is one of their leading theories is that's how time works.
Hmm.
I think it's University of Sydney.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that's why they say like that may explain those psychic phenomenon, or that may explain something like, being able to glimpse where, the people she saw them in the future.
Hmm. Yeah. Mike Ricksucker wrote a great book on time.
Hmm.
And one of his theories in there is basically the same thing, but he puts it as the stacked time theory, to
Okay.
where it's the same thing as what you're saying, but it's stacked up like if you
Yeah.
took a stack of pitch, piled them on top of each other,
Right, right.
something like that.
Yeah, that
But
makes sense.
yeah, I mean, I remember hearing EVP from the Stanley Hotel. I forget the name of the people that were doing it. It's the people that had they were Rooter Rotor plumbers, and then they started a paranormal team. I can't remember who that is. Taps, maybe.
I don't know.
But anyhow,
Yeah.
they were there and they went into the Queen's room and they said, are you here? Are you here? And the EVP they got was, of course I'm here. Where are you?
Wow.
And they're like, Princess, can you hear us? And she's like, where are you? This is not funny. I'm calling security. And that was the clearest EVP,
I would love to.
which reminds me, I don't know if I sent it to you, but I had an EVP happen to me with here at the studio.
Yeah.
As I know you can't see it, but behind me is my palm tree that kind of fell over outside. And on the other side here is my art gallery, and
Uh-huh.
then that leads out into my house. And the one day, me and my sister were sitting here, and she sits on the other side of the table here, and we were doing our show, and I look up, I saw a blue light go across the hallway.
Hmm.
I'm like, Jen, I just saw a blue light. And we have things happen to us all the time when we're podcasting. We've had EVPs, all that stuff. So she jumps up, grabs her phone, grabs the spirit box, and she turns on, and we got one of the clearest EVPs I've ever had in my life.
Mhm.
She's like, I want to know if you know who lives here. And clear as day, you hear, "Hey, Joe."
Oh, no way. That's
And I played that for Jackie's mom, and she's like, "Oh my God, that's Jackie's voice." I'm like, "Yeah."
wow. That's
Hmm.
very cool.
Yeah. One of the clearest EVPs I've ever gotten.
I like hearing the really clear EVPs because
Hmm.
so often you hear them and there's like super garbled and they don't sound
Yeah,
like anything and you're like, oh, that is such a stretch. That is just like scanning radio frequencies and
exactly.
you're like bending that to fit
Hmm.
into this interpretation. And there's so many of them are like
Oh,
that.
yeah. I
So
mean, you'll sit there and you'll be like, "Is there anybody here?" And you hear this, and they'll be like, "Oh, it said demons."
yeah.
No, it did not say demons. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And I hate stuff like that because
Mhm.
it brings in the skepticism of like, oh, that's never real, you know?
Yeah.
So the clear ones are fascinating to me because even if it is a wild coincidence, that's a heck of a coincidence
Oh,
when
yeah.
you hear it very clearly and it
Uh-huh.
applies to the situation.
Yeah, and that's what I mean with that one. What's the chances of us turning on the radios, the SB7,
Mhm.
and hearing something say, "Hey, Joe," right at that second?
Exactly, exactly. That's
And especially that's what she always said to me was even when she'd call on the phone and that she'd like, "Hey, Joe, hey, Joe."
interesting. All right, so let's talk about some of your other stories.
All right.
You want to talk about the Bone House experience?
Yes, that's my one of my favorite locations is here in Toledo.
Okay.
It's one that Haunted Toledo got a call one night.
Hmm.
Now, me and my sister are not on a team, but we help a lot of teams out. They invite us to their events and stuff. And Haunted Toledo's good friends of ours, and they mainly do like history. They do hauntings,
Hmm.
but in the realm of history when they do their TV shows and stuff like that.
Okay.
So Haunted Toledo got a call one night. It's from this guy that bought a house down on Newton Street,
Okay.
and he said that weird things are happening at this house. He
Okay.
bought it to renovate and resell. It's a beautiful house. It's 520 Newton Street, I believe. But anyhow, this is downtown near the train station.
Okay.
Okay. He, Haunted Toledo, Chris from Haunted Toledo gets his call. And this guy says, weird stuff's happening, man. You got to come check this house out. He says, I started the renovations and every single board I pull off the wall, bones fall out.
Oh my God.
And Chris was like, I'll be there in a minute, you know?
Yeah, be right there.
So they set up an investigation. And sure enough, every single board he pulls off the walls or the floor, there's bones.
Oh,
So this house is full of bones, literally. So they set up to do their investigation that night. And all of a sudden they hear this loud noise.
wait, they didn't call the cops?
No, no.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so Chris and them set up their equipment to do an investigation that night. And all of a sudden they hear this huge noise outside and then sirens and all this. And come to find out, someone was shot right outside the house that night.
Oh my God.
Okay. So the cops came and all that. Well, they did their investigation and weird stuff happened. They found women's underwear in the walls. Found brushes. They found love letters hidden in one of the corners. Just strange stuff. The one night they were there, they have it on video. A board was actually ripped off the wall and flew across the room.
Oh my God.
So they do their investigation that night and the news finds out about it. So the news crews came and you can check it out if you ever go on the web, type on WNWO Channel 24 Toledo
Hmm.
Bone House, and you'll see that segment. So the news comes, does a thing with them. The coroner comes, takes some of the bones,
Hmm.
and they determined that they were mainly canine and chicken.
Wow. Well,
Okay.
I know there's a lot of folklore around good luck charms of like putting
Mhm.
a dead dog or a dead cat in
Yeah. Yeah,
the,
like they do with the cemeteries and stuff.
yeah, like put it in the
So,
walls to for to protect the house and all
mhm.
of that.
Yeah. But every single board had bones raining. Like you pull a board off the wall and bones would rain out of the wall.
Wow.
Well, after doing the research, and that's what Haunted Toledo is really good at, is doing research, is they found out that the house was actually a hub in that neighborhood for the religion Santeria.
Okay.
And they do stuff like that.
Yeah.
And upstairs there was a table, and you could see the cut marks in the table and all that above the steps.
Wow, that's freaky.
Yeah, so like I said, the coroner said they were mainly canine and chicken bones. I have seen some big bones come out of that house,
Wow.
and there's all kinds of stuff. Now, when Chris asked me and my sister to come out, we did the investigation that night,
Hmm.
and I didn't see it myself, but my sister actually saw an apparition of a girl kneeling down in the corner
Wow.
against the wall, like kneeling down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I will say though that if they were putting like chicken bones and animal bones in the walls. So one time I was in Australia,
Hmm.
and in Australia there is a prison there, an old prison that is, since closed up. Well, it was more, I guess it started out as an asylum. And then
Okay.
it became, when that sort of, they closed that down, and then it became a home for orphaned girls and girls who went to Australia to work for wealthy families until they were like able to get, set with a family. So then there
Hmm.
were like girls. And then after that, it became a prison facility where they were housing male criminals. And I think they were from Ireland, and they would ship them over there. And so it's a museum. It was a museum at the time I went. And part of the thing, like of the display, was this huge case. And it was like a cross section of the walls. And there were a couple of these, right? And you could see the layers of different kinds of things. Like you saw like first it was like little rags and scraps of paper and stuff. And then it would be like little trinkets that girls would have.
Yeah.
And then I don't even know what was in the third layer, but what it had happened was because it was such poor conditions in the building, it attracted rats.
Okay.
And the rats were like taking that stuff at night and bringing it back to their nest, and that's how it all that stuff got in the walls. So some of that other stuff, if those walls at the bone house had a bunch of, like questionable
Hmm.
bones that maybe weren't cleaned properly, that could easily have attracted rats.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. One of the interesting things about the Bone House is, besides us getting great EVPs up there, I remember Sarah, the one night we were up there and we weren't getting too much stuff. And Sarah was like, if you guys don't cooperate with me, I'm banishing you out of this house. And right then we got an EVP that had a bad word in it. We're like, whoa, all right. But the interesting thing about the Bone House is one of my favorite tools, and I know a lot of people don't like it, but I use this here, the K2.
What is that? What is
And this is a proximity detector.
okay?
It works on radio or electromagnetic wavelengths.
Hmm.
So I could turn this on and put it up by my phone, which is on airplane mode for the show, but it would pick that up. It
Right.
would bounce around. Like right now, it's kind of bouncing.
Hmm.
But if I put it up against the power,
Yeah.
my power box here, it would light up.
Yeah.
And this is great because you can get a good baseline of readings and that. And a lot of people don't like the K2 because it's easy to be fooled
Okay.
if you don't know what you're doing. Like
Right.
if I like right now, it's freaking out because we're around the internet stuff.
Right. Right.
The Bone House has no power, no water, anything like that. You walk in with the K2 on a front porch and see the green light is the power light.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. See how the green light's on?
Yeah.
It's like that. You could stand on the front porch, hold this indoor, and it goes right to red.
Huh.
Full magnetic resonance, full magnetic electromagnetics in the air. There's no power in the building. There's no water, but yet it goes to red like as if you're holding it up against a 440 voltage power line.
So is the theory behind that that if there are some sort of spirits there, that they have an electromagnetic frequency?
That's what we believe, yeah.
Okay.
But the thing is, this is useless at the Bone House because it goes to red, which is very rare unless you're literally putting it against a 440 voltage thing or you have what's called an EMF pump, which I don't like. So stuff like that is useless.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we mainly used like motion detectors. We used our digital recorders,
Hmm.
which is another great tool that I use.
Sure.
Um, our digital recorders and that. But we've also had some weird stuff happen. Like we were up there one night and we were up in the attic.
Okay.
That's where all main parts of the bones were found is in the attic and that. But well, let me skip ahead a little bit. But the owner was there and I was like, come on, man. Really, under every board, he's like, watch. I saw him take a hammer and peel a board up off the floor. And we looked down and there was a little carved head
Ooh.
out of a bone of a human.
Wow, that's
And
weird.
yeah, I would not believe him at all. I would be like, you put it there if I didn't see him pull that board up.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, anyways, we're all up there doing EVP sessions and stuff, and he's working on the house, so the windows didn't quite fit. And I was like, I'm surprised we don't have any bats. And just as I said that, a white bat flew over all our heads, freaked us out.
A white
Now, the
bat?
thing is, yeah, white bat. We all saw it.
Uh-huh.
We don't have white bats.
Yeah.
It wasn't a dove. It wasn't a pigeon. It clear as day. It was a bat that flew over our heads that was white. And when it happened, it was like 6 feet wide, but it was only about 4 inches wide or so. But stuff like that happened at the Bone House.
That's weird.
Um, the steps now in these old homes, the steps are really steep. The steps were only about 3 inches maybe
Okay.
each run, so you had to be careful going up and down the steps.
Yikes.
I was walking down the steps one time and I got caught, my toe got caught on a nail and I almost fell down the steps until I realized my toes never touched the steps.
Oh, weird.
So it was almost like I got caught on a nail sticking up on the tip of my boot in the front. So
You are very connected to the spirit world.
yeah,
Okay, let's
stuff like that.
let's move on.
Hmm.
What about is it Fayette, Ohio?
Yeah,
Fayette?
that's where there was an effigy mound.
Okay.
Okay. So one of my other things I do are mounds and giants and Native American stuff.
Okay.
Ohio used to have over 10,000 mounds in it,
Really?
and there's still a bunch left, but 90% of them are all bulldozed over. Down in Fayette, Ohio, there was a effigy mound. Now, the difference between a regular mound and effigy mound is an effigy mound would be a shape of something,
Okay.
and a regular mound is just a conical mound.
Okay.
So the mound that was down in Fayette was a effigy mound that was in the shape of a menorah
Oh,
and an oil lamp.
interesting.
Okay. Now, what's weird about that is that's a Jewish thing.
Right?
Okay. Why would that be in Ohio? So it all kind of goes along with the other things that I found.
Hmm.
But right now, when you look at the map of Fayette, Ohio,
Yeah.
you won't see that mound because it was bulldozed over.
Ooh,
And there are drawings of the mound, but it doesn't exist anymore. It's
okay.
just a farm field now. But the interesting thing, next to the farm field where that was,
Yeah.
you can go on Google Maps now and see it. There's a ditch, and the ditch is in a weird shape. Well, come to find out, the shape of that ditch is the Hebrew letter for the word Sheen. So you can still go on Google Maps and see it.
Wow, that's wild.
There's an actual letter of it's called Sheen. So you think, wait a minute, Jewish stuff or Middle Eastern stuff in Ohio as mounds? Because you got to remember too, whenever you talk to Native Americans, they always say that no, they didn't make the mounds. Our ancestors made the mounds. They were here when we showed up.
Mm,
Okay. So that goes back to me thinking, well, what were they? What were the mounds for?
right.
You know, a lot of them are burial mounds,
Okay.
but the Native Americans say that they were there before and they just took on that tradition of burying their dead in the mounds.
Oh,
Okay. Good example, downtown here, there were two mounds on one on each side of the river. And the correlation between mounds and hauntings are really strong. Where that mound was on this side of the river is now where a Frisch's restaurant is. When they built the bridge, they bulldozed that whole mound, shoved the dirt over to the side
hmm,
to make the bridge. Where they pushed the dirt is what's called the Oliver House. Now, Oliver House is very haunted. Okay.
okay.
In 1985, they were redoing the parking lot. And the legend is that when they were redoing the parking lot, they started finding human bones. So they finished the parking lot real quick.
Hmm. Yikes.
So I was doing a tour for people downtown and I was like showing them, see that building? That's where the mound was. And I said, where do you think all that stuff that was in that mound ended up? And they're like, I don't know. I said, you're standing on it.
Oh,
Okay. And I believe that's why that area is so haunted. And the Bone House is only a mile away from that.
wow.
So, anyways, getting back to your, I know I'm just babbling, but down in Ohio, there's a place called Newark, Ohio.
Okay.
And Newark, Ohio used to be like a mecca. The whole town was mounds.
Oh, okay.
All that's left there now is the Great Circle Mound and the Octagon Mound.
Hmm.
The Octagon Mound is very interesting because it's an 18-year cycle of the moon goes on each point of that octagon. So if you're sitting at a certain point in that mound, every 18 years, there's the moon will fall on one of those points.
Oh, okay.
Another interesting thing about that is the dimensions of the mound, the octagon mound, not the great circle yet, but the octagon mound.
Yeah.
If you went over to Egypt and grabbed the Great Pyramid, the big one,
Hmm.
and you took it over to Newark, Ohio, and you dropped it in that, the points on that mound would match up to the points of the corners of the Great Pyramid perfectly, no matter which way you put it in there.
Interesting.
Another interesting thing about it is the entrance to the Octagon Mound is off a little bit from true north.
Hmm.
The degree that that's off by is the exact degree that the Great Pyramid is from the bottom to the point. That angle is the exact same as the angle that the entrance is to the Octagon Mound.
Interesting.
So there's a correlation there.
So these mounds, you
Hmm.
can go in the mounds.
Yes, those you can.
Okay.
The the Octagon Mound is right now it's in a golf course.
Okay.
And the reason they did that is back in the 30s they were going to plow over the mound and make a housing development. And the city came in and said, no, you can't do that. So they turned it into a golf course so they wouldn't ruin it. Now, the Great Circle is just about a mile north of that.
Okay.
And that's still there. That's very interesting. You go in there and you see this huge circle out of nowhere. But the interesting thing about Newark, Ohio is there was a amateur archaeologist called David Wyrick back in 1888. He knew that there was stuff there. He knew that there were artifacts there,
Hmm.
Native American artifacts. And he was digging, and one day he found something.
Hmm.
And this is what he found. The keystone, okay, because it's in the shape of a keystone, as if you were in an arch. It's the last stone you would put in place.
Okay.
Okay. The weird thing about this stone is,
What kind of stone is it?
I'm not sure. I
Okay.
know the other one was black onyx
Okay.
that I'll show you in a second, but I'm not sure this one. Now, of course, this isn't the real one. The real ones are down in Coshocton, Ohio at the museum.
Yeah.
These are replicas I did buy at the museum. But anyhow, he saw that there was Native American writing on it. And if you see, there's writing
Yeah.
on every surface. So he took this down to Cincinnati and had someone look at it, probably get it appraised or whatever. And they said, no, that's not Native American. That's some Hebrew.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Hebrew writing.
Hmm.
He's like, oh, I found this in Ohio. They're like, no, you didn't. He's like, yes, I did. I found it in Ohio. So he knew that there was stuff there. He came back, and when he came back, they were tearing apart a stone mound. It was the only stone mound that they found. They were tearing it apart to make the wall for the reservoir that's there now.
Okay.
They ended up taking 10,000 cartloads of stone away from this mound. So it was big.
Yeah.
At the bottom was a clay basin. And David Wyrick was something is up with this mound. For one, it was stone, it wasn't dirt.
Hmm.
And they say that it was a conical mound, but I believe it was more of a step mound
Okay.
because the thing is in the Bible, there's a quote that says they build them in high places, mounds in all their cities. And they would do that because that was the place where they didn't have like the churches that we go to now. They would stand on these rise, the mounds as a riser to talk to all the people. So David Wyrick grabbed a few people and they went back and they started digging into the clay under this great mound.
Yeah.
And he came across a giant casket
Hmm.
or a coffin. When he took the lid off, there was bones in there from a giant.
Ooh.
And this giant had the copper bracelets. He had the copper breastplate on. And the minute he touched the bones, they just started falling apart because that's what happens in nature. The bones just crumble to dust.
Sure.
Now, there's two stories. He found this box. There's two stories. One says it was on the chest. The other story says it was underneath. I don't know. But he found this box and he picked it up as a stone box and he rattled it. So there was something in there. They pried it open, and what they found inside was what they call the Decalogue stone. This is a black onyx stone.
Uh-huh.
As you can see, there's writing all over the whole thing
Right.
in old style block Hebrew.
Okay.
And across, I don't know if your listeners would know, but on the front of it, there's a figure
Hmm.
carved into it. Above the figure, it says Moshe. So that's Moses.
Oh, okay.
And written all over it in old style block Hebrew are the Ten Commandments.
Huh.
He found this with a giant in Newark, Ohio. So we believe that Newark, Ohio was a mecca of where the ancients would come and either worship or whatever. But being Hebrew, that makes me think that it was either the lost tribe of the Israelites or some other tribe that came over here.
Okay.
And there's two theories. That one is that they came up from the Gulf up into Ohio.
Uh-huh.
Another theory is they came down from like the like Buffalo, New York, all them places
Okay.
and down. And
Uh-huh.
they settled, which would make sense. I mean, if
Sure.
people did travel back then,
Yeah, of course.
but I've seen so many things where they were giants. Okay, and this is another example of a giant found in Ohio.
Okay.
So it makes you think, well, why would there be Hebrews here? And I do know that when an explorer came over and he saw the Native Americans, he said that he was so familiar with their looks, he felt like he was in the Jewish part of London.
Oh,
So they had those same features. So people think, well, wait a minute, there was nobody here before Columbus. Well, there was. There were
of course. Yeah.
for thousands and thousands of years, there were people living here. And I believe that the people that built the mounds and stuff like that were giants.
Okay.
Now, I'm not talking 20-foot giants or nothing like that. They were just really big. They're around 8 feet to 9 feet tall.
Hmm.
And we would still consider them giants. We see them now. They're called basketball players. They're called professional wrestlers, stuff like that.
Yeah, there are definitely people who are much taller.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Now, here in Toledo, there were two types of giants found. About 4 miles from my house here is the Toledo Yacht Club. Toledo Yacht Club is famous for being very haunted. Next to the Toledo Yacht Club is the headquarters for the Coast Guard.
Okay.
Well, in between those two areas, before they were built there, but in between those two areas, back in the 1800s, they found some giants there buried.
Hmm.
They were in a seated position. They were buried. And these giants, they said, had double rows of teeth. So instead of the one row that we have, they had
Yeah,
double rows.
that's weird.
Yeah. In Maumee, Ohio, which is about 10 miles down the river, they found more giants. Now, these giants are the ones with the 6 fingers and 6 toes.
That's so weird.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But the thing is, okay, so that's two types of giants.
Right.
One's with the double rows of teeth, and the other one's with the 6 fingers and 6 toes. Both are mentioned in the Bible. I'm not sure the exact areas, but both are mentioned in the Bible.
Huh.
But there's a thing now where people are born with 6 fingers and 6 toes. It's
Sure.
just that sometimes they take them off at birth,
Yeah, yeah.
make the people right, I guess. I don't know. And there's a thing called, um, there's a thing where they do have double rows of teeth. One of the things, if you ever want to be freaked out, look at the X-ray of a baby's.
I've heard about that. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the craziest thing. But people are born with double rows of teeth. It's just not as common as you think.
Hmm.
And I just think that after thousands of years of the different families that being born, I think that just, you know, we kind of grew out of
Just a genetic trait.
it. Hmm.
Hmm.
So that's when you hear about the different giants having 6 fingers, 6 toes, or double rows of teeth. I just think that it was just something that happened back then,
Yeah,
and we kind of grew out of it
yeah.
because it still does happen to this day, but not as it's like 1 in a million people get it.
Right, right. Yeah.
But there were found giants all over the world. Now, another thing, people think, well, wait a minute, why would be here Israelites here? Has there been any other places? There's a thing down in Bat Creek, Tennessee. A
Okay.
gentleman was going through the creek and he found what they call the Bat Creek stone.
Okay.
Now, this is a very small stone and it had Indian writing on it. And he donated it to the museum. The museum put it up for years. And one time someone came in and said, that's upside down.
Oh,
He's like, what do you mean? He's like, it's upside down. He flipped over, says, this is Hebrew writing. And it says with him. So this stuff goes on all over. There are people that I know on Expedition Unknown, they found some boulders in Ohio that had Hebrew writing on them.
it's interesting. I wonder like why, because all of these things seem to be pretty explainable, right? People moved
Yeah.
around, people, had different
Hmm.
genetic things happen. So what is it that people want to believe, like conspiracy theories? Like why it's like, oh no, we used to have giants and they were
Yeah.
an alien race. And
Uh-huh.
what is it that is intellectually or emotionally for people that they want to believe that these things are some sort of paranormal event.
Yeah. I think it's just the intrigue,
Hmm. Hmm.
the mystery of it. The things that, I mean, you hear all the time of like the giants, people finding giant skeletons and the Smithsonian coming in and taking them away, and stuff like that. I think it's just that intrigue into the unknown that people really kind of gravitate to.
Yeah, but then, was it last year that the government was basically like, yeah, we know there are aliens, and everyone was,
Yeah,
eh, like nobody got excited about it. Everyone was
I
just like,
know. I don't know. Yeah,
like
they're there.
yeah. And I mean, for me personally, I've always believed that there were because it didn't seem likely that we would be the only life that formed anywhere ever.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
and
yeah.
all this diverse, life forms that we have and everything, and it never happened any other way in
Yeah.
any other place. It just didn't seem like that could be possible to me. And so, but then it's the question is, are they advanced enough to get here? And
Hmm.
and then we go back to the ideas of like these stories of, people being abducted and,
Yeah.
and like, is that just a collective kind of story that seeps in? And is it different? Because obviously you see the similarities between the
Mhm.
fairies stories,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
is it like just we have updated technology, so those stories morph into something else, and we just want to believe that unexplainable things have, a concrete reality behind them?
Yeah. I mean, you got to remember the internet really blew everything up
Yeah.
because it's so easy now to connect. It's so easy to fake stuff too, but it's so easy to connect and tell your stories and stuff like that. You mentioned about, why weren't they here that. So back in 1984, we found our first exoplanet. An exoplanet is a planet outside of our own solar system.
Okay.
Since then, they figured out that the billions and billions and billions of suns that are out there, different size stars or whatever, they found that pretty much all of them have planets going around them. So the possibility of there being alien life on those is really good. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
There's got to be, whether it doesn't matter if it's plants or actually
Right.
people or stuff like that.
Or even
But there
bacteria.
is something that's called the Fermi paradox.
Okay.
Now, the Fermi paradox is one night Enrique Fermi was sitting around a table with a bunch of other scientists having dinner, and he looked at him and said, "Where are they?" And they're all like, "Who?" He says, "The aliens. Where are the aliens?" And they started talking, and he came up with what he calls the Fermi paradox. And this is different mathematical figures, but basically, it's they're not here, or they were here at one time. Who knows?
Mhm.
Because they're obviously the solar system's been around for billions of years.
Right.
But he was thinking, well, okay, let's say the reason they're not here is their planet has too much gravity where they can't fly off of it. Maybe they're a water planet.
Sure.
Maybe they just don't care. There's so many different reasons why we wouldn't see them. And one of the main things is time. The closest planet we have to us is Proxima Centauri b.
Hmm.
That's four light years away. You think, oh, that ain't that far. That's 4 light years.
Right.
At the speeds we have right now, it would take like 72 million years to get there,
Yeah.
It's so far. And even if you think about that, a lot of the planets, like you look up at Orion, you see Betelgeuse, which is the big red star at the top.
Right.
The right shoulder star.
Right.
That's 400,000 light years away. So even if we wanted to travel there, even if we could go at the speed of light, it would
Hmm.
still take us 400,000 years.
Right.
So the distances are so vast
Yeah.
that even though they may be so advanced in us, they may not just make it here.
Right.
Now, there are a lot of theories, and I believe them, that we've been visited in the past, or even that they're still visiting us now. But think about this. Let's say you're in a civilization that's so far advanced that you have time travel tourism.
Right.
Well, you want to see what the dinosaurs look like? Just go back in time and see them. You want to see what life was like in the 1800s? Go back and see them. So maybe that's what we're seeing. Who knows? Maybe the spaceships that we're seeing are just tourists. You don't know. I mean, this is just stuff I'm throwing out.
Right.
But who knows? Because we do have obvious evidence of ant people and stuff like that that have been here
Yeah.
in cave drawings and stuff like that. Cave drawings of spaceships from thousands of years ago. So who knows?
Yeah.
We won't know till we're there.
Right. 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 And that's the thing, you can speculate on all of this and what
Hmm.
that might be, but like I've seen some of those pictures of like spaceships, and a lot of them I'm like, that could have been like a curved dish. That could have
Yeah,
been with a cover on it, you know,
yeah,
like and all of those where you see like, oh, there's a woman in the 1920s on her cell phone. It's,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, that could be a compact.
It wouldn't work. There's
Yeah,
no cell towers.
exactly, exactly. And so, but I am now kind of thinking about, we were talking earlier about the time cube theory
Yeah.
and like how that plays in, because maybe there's
Mhm.
a way to, spring forward to a place, if all, time is happening at the same time,
Hmm.
maybe that is tying into whether or not people can do this sort of time tourism. Because
Yeah,
like I said, the theory
exactly.
doesn't support going back in time. And
Hmm.
honestly, it would be a terrible idea. It would be such
Yeah.
a bad idea because you wouldn't have any immunity against any of the diseases,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't know how to really behave, even though we speculate. Even going back to the 1800s, you get yourself in trouble like in
Oh
a
yeah.
split second. And like I, if I'm going back to the 1500s, it's going to take them like 20 minutes to like look at me and be witch.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, where's this witch
Nope.
with her strange clothing, her garb?
Uh-huh. Have you ever heard the chronovisor?
No.
It's okay. So in the Vatican, there's a thing, and this was built by a pope years ago,
Yeah.
and it's called the chronovisor.
Okay.
And what this is supposedly this thing exists, and what it was a almost like a video machine that could see back in time.
Hmm.
And supposedly they have pictures of Jesus's crucifixion, stuff like that. So they have this thing that you're not actually going back in time, but you're being able to see back in time.
Interesting.
So that's something interesting for you to look up. That would take, I mean, we're already over an hour here, but that would take us over 3 hours to talk about that alone.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap it up then. So,
All right.
where can people find you and your podcast?
Nowhere. Nowhere. We keep it to ourselves. No. Um, like I said, we're the 222 Paranormal Podcast. We can be found anywhere you get your podcast from. I always tell people go to iHeartRadio just because it's the easiest,
Okay.
but really anywhere you get your podcast from. We do have a YouTube channel, but it's not that great right now. I'm working on that.
Hmm.
But honestly, just anywhere that you listen to podcasts, just type in 222 Paranormal Podcast and we'll pop up. We also do have a website, the
Okay.
222 Paranormal.
Are
So
you
that's
still
that.
doing the convention?
Yes. We don't put on conventions anymore. Like I said, we did the one and it was awesome, but we are traveling to many, many conventions that we kind of scaled back a little bit. We used to do 2 to 3 a month,
Okay.
but we kind of scaled back. Jen got another job, so he doesn't really have the vacation time. And we're taking these times now, instead of going to conventions and being vendors, we visit them and walk around and talk, which is kind of weird now because we're not sitting there.
Yeah.
But we're also spending our time going to different locations around the country and doing ghost hunts and stuff like that. Like I said, we were just in the Virgin Islands last week
Sure.
doing investigations at the Anberg plantation, stuff like that.
Oh,
So we travel all over. We're not putting on any conventions, but we are visiting a lot of them now.
okay, great. So before we sign off, do you have any
Mhm.
final thoughts for listeners?
Um, just one of the things I always tell people, and I'm actually teaching a class on this in a couple weeks on photos, how to get why you get orbs in your photos, is know your equipment.
Yeah.
If you're going to do this, if you're going to become a ghost hunter or a paranormal investigator, there's a big difference. If you're going to become a ghost hunter, learn your equipment first.
Hmm.
The big thing now are cell phones and using the apps on the cell phones.
Hmm.
Now, if you're doing that, remember that the cell phone listens to everything you say and will the apps are made to work.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They're made to work. So they're listening to you talk, stuff like that. So really learn your equipment. If you call yourself a paranormal investigator, please do it right. I consider myself a ghost hunter because a paranormal investigator like Haunted Toledo or Toledo, Ohio Ghost Hunter Society, they won't even show up to a location till at least 3 months after they started the investigation because they're doing the research.
Okay.
They're doing the backgrounds. They're taking a look at the people that live in these houses, how they act. What do they do? You walk into a house. Does it have pentagrams all over the walls? Does it have, you
Right.
got to look at stuff like that. So if you're going to call yourself a paranormal investigator, really do your research
Okay.
and do it right. But also learn your equipment.
Yeah.
That's the main thing.
Great. Good advice. Thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time today. I really appreciate
Thank
you
you.
coming on and talking with me.
It was a blast. Anytime you want to hear me babble, just
I will
Joe,
take
get on the
note.
show. Oh my God.
All right. As always, thanks for listening to Folkloring. If you liked what you heard, please consider leaving a rating and review, and don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. If you have any questions or comments or would like to suggest a topic for a future episode, please email us at folkloringpod@gmail.com or message us on Facebook or Instagram. Other places you can find me are at the Folklore Podcast as the theater, film, and storytellers correspondent, or creating folklore-inspired games at madmenandheroes.com. Stay curious, stay connected, and keep the traditions alive. And I hope that wherever you are, folklore is making your life more magical.